Hello everyone. Well, I'm joined here with Thomas Newman, who's a film composer. My name is Hannah Rankin, and I'm doing this interview for the Edinburgh International Film Festival. Thomas, it's a real privilege for me today to speak to you. You've written loads of music that I love for films. I'm a bassoonist myself, so I'm also a boxer as well as a bassoonist. So I do two
I must
different
ask you
jobs.
about that.
Yeah, no, I do two different jobs, but yeah, you've written music for films that I absolutely love, so it's a real privilege to speak to you today. What kind of drew you into film music anyway? Was it the family connection that kind of got you straight into it, or was it an actual genuine desire of your own?
It became a desire. It didn't start as one, although I had been around it most of my life because my dad obviously was a film composer. He was much older when he had me, so he died when I was 14. At the same time, I would go to sound stages, and I would watch him. I have real memories of watching him score and conduct the music to Camelot and to The Greatest Story Ever Told and How the West Was Won. Some of these kind of big epic movies he had done in the 60s. And I think I always liked drama. I think drama always appealed to me, storytelling, and eventually, I guess in my mid to late 20s, I started to feel like I could put those two things together. That my love of music and the music in the context of drama really interested me, and I thought I might have something to add.
Oh, well, for me, like when it comes to music, one of my favorite genres to perform in is actually opera, because of the drama that's going on on stage above us. It kind of makes it really magical, and I suppose it's something quite similar to that. You're getting to be part of the magic of the moment when it's created. Yeah, it's kind of like being the storyteller, but hidden underneath the stage.
Right.
It's a very exciting experience. It's very different, but for me, it always gives you that little excitement. Like when the lights go down, it's very similar to cinema. When the lights go
Yeah.
down, I get that little buzz in my stomach of, oh, it's gonna be a story. It's gonna be exciting. So
I think that's true for me too. The minute, I mean, the lights going down or the curtain rising, and in the days of curtains rising, was just always a time of real promise of something to take place. I guess a little bit like the unopened gift is so beautiful to ponder, and of course it becomes more or less complex when you open it and you see what it is. But just the promise of something is real fun in the act of storytelling.
absolutely. And like you said, when you finally do open it and the curtain goes up, there's all that oohs and ahs of what you can see on for me on the stage, but also the sound starts to come out the pit and the whole thing becomes a story. And that's
Yeah, and the hush of the audience and stuff. Yeah, it's pretty ritualized when you think about it. This whole idea. I mean, in the case of symphonies, of a conductor coming out, or actually a concert master or mistress tuning the orchestra, a conductor coming out to applause, bowing, and then beginning. It's so ritualized.
Yeah, I do find it funny actually, when you sometimes go to films nowadays and people clap at the end of a film. And I shouldn't be so surprised by it, because actually it's quite kind of like, if you do enjoy something, you tend to clap for your appreciation. However, it's always seemed rather odd to me, but actually it does make quite good sense when it's a fantastic film.
But it's odd because there's no real people you're clapping. I mean, no living person you're clapping for. You're clapping for it. Yeah, that may just be a holdover, a ritual holdover of saying, I want to show my appreciation, even though there's no one up there to bow. That's interesting.
Yeah, us humans like routines, don't we? So I think it's
I
probably
think we
part of it.
do. Yes, storytelling has got to be part of that. Tell me a story.
Yeah, exactly. So quick question. What is the very first film you remember seeing? And can you remember what cinema you saw it in?
Well, I mean, maybe the first movie I had got a real feeling from, because I think that's kind of what defines movies in a way is the feeling you come away with. Probably was The Wizard of Oz. There must have been earlier ones, but that had such an effect. The songwriting so powerful, and the performance, all the performances so lovely. I want to say, I wouldn't have seen it in the Cinerama Dome in Los Angeles, which is a great theater. I must have seen Wizard of Oz on TV. So, because that's how it kind of began its return into to modern culture. But that may be the earliest memory of something: flying monkeys and hourglasses, and sand running out, and Dorothy being trapped and calling out to her aunt. All that stuff was really got me. I mean, it really sunk in. But as a theater experience, I think it would probably be the Cinerama Dome, but I don't remember, I don't know if you know this, it's a big dome in Hollywood. But some of my dad's movies premiered there. I remember How the West was one, which was a Cinerama experience, which is one of these 3 cameras kind of going across this huge screen, and this kind of, I guess, a pre-IMAX, just how do we raise the level of the experience and kind of hyper realize it. And then, of course, sound coming out left and right. I remember that in the movie Deliverance, seeing that in the Cinerama Dome and hearing bird song and creek babble kind of around me, and how amazing that was at the time. That must have been the 70s. How great it was just to be immersed.
Absolutely. And that's something that's really interesting in the cinema at the moment. Obviously, everything's always developing. There's always new things happening. Do you kind of enjoy the IMAX experience, when you feel like the actual things are coming out of the screen towards you? I can imagine you enjoy the musical and the sound aspects, because like the whole surround thing and everything coming from different points, I love that. But do you enjoy the actual visuals that come along with it?
Well, I do have an opinion about that, which is, what am I doing in the middle of it? What I mean, if I'm sitting in an audience, why am I in between a gunfight? That confuses me in the act of what storytelling is. Likewise, if you have various sounds, I mean, I guess they're orchestral sounds coming way left and right. Where are they? Who's that horn player over there? I think maybe you accept it more with sound and ambiences, things that raise the level of the experience. But this whole idea of utter immersion, I get confused about who I am. I feel like I'm a part of it, but what am I doing there? I don't know anything about what's happening, but there I am kind of looking around and say, well, someone's shooting, there's a bullet buzzing past my ear. And so I'm not so sure. I mean, it's all newness, and I get that it's kind of more like a thrill ride, Atmos, sound, etc. But I'm not sure I conclude that it's the greatest way to have an experience. I guess the jury's out for me a bit.
No, I actually was going to say I quite agree with you on that, to be honest, because obviously when you're hearing a story and it's such a great story that you feel like you're immersed in it. So when someone's reading to you, but you can see it all in your head. For me, I'm often either one of the characters, the main characters, or I'm actually watching the whole image. So to be actually in the center of, like you said, the gunfight, and I'm not the person that's shooting the gun, or
yeah, what am I doing here?
Yeah, why am I here? So yeah, no, I must admit I agree with that. And I know a lot of people actually struggle a bit with the sort of like the visuals, because it can make you feel quite nauseous.
Yeah, and it darkens your eyes and things are coming at you and all that. I mean, I guess it really depends on the subject matter too. And like anything, I think any new format, reverb is a great tool, but too much of it is wrong. So maybe if it's just right, it's incredible. And the things I've seen maybe aren't quite there yet.
I always feel like with animations, for example, that there's so much you can really go into that sort of thing, because it's kind of like the weird and the wonderful, and it's the cartoon element. So being part of that actually is quite effective. You've actually written some music for some animated films. Did you enjoy doing that?
Very much. I mean, it started with a certain amount of brute fear. I mean, 2003 is when I did Finding Nemo, and I'd never done animation before. This was, I think, the third or fourth film in Pixar history. My cousin Randy had scored all the other Pixar movies ahead of me, Toy Story and A Bug's Life, I think. And you really have to, you're really a writer in a situation like animation. I mean, just to get back to this notion of what's real and what's not, everything in animation is a fabrication. So in a way, a director can tell you anything and he'll be right. You see a fish in the high corner of a screen and it's there for a reason, and even if you didn't notice, maybe you should have and stuff. And when Pixar hired me, they had a way of working, which is they gave you like 10 minutes of footage that you would write to. I keep thinking it's like, if Tom is terrible at this, we'll get out early. But how will I do in the 10 minutes? And then some time goes by, then you do the body of the movie. And then there's another recording period where you do the last 10, maybe you're doing some cleanup and rewrites or whatever. And my cousin Randy said, just look 10 minutes ahead. If you look at the entire film, it's just too terrifying, because, everything kind of has to be accommodated. And of course, what is music for animated image? You kind of think, well, is it Carl stalling, and is it, you know, what we call Mickey Mousing, or is it not? I think Pixar was never interested in mimicking old Warner Brothers cartoons.
Yeah.
But you had to kind of learn that. I had to make sure, like, is the flap of a fishtail something that needs to be caught with music, or is it enough to be caught with a sound effect? And, you know, obviously a lot of people are going to weigh in with opinions about that stuff. So when I worked on it, I used to say, this is my first and last animated movie. I just didn't think I could ever do it, but I did, and it was great. You know, you kind of measure you measure your result by the fear you had ahead of that result. And I mean, maybe you know this in boxing.
Yes.
And you learn about what's different about who you are and what you fear. And hopefully the more you face that kind of brute fear, not that you'll be less afraid, but there'll be a context for the fear you have in facing like a really tough gig in the future.
That is actually a very similar experience in boxing, because often you can get in there. I've fought some world champions. I've been a world champion myself. So
congratulations.
Thank you. When you get into the ring, it's that, you know, you're going ahead against, you know, you should fear your opponent, but it's that kind of excited fear, you know, where you're going to learn so much from it that you're ready to go head on into it. And all of your preparation before makes you feel like, okay, I'm going to learn stuff and I'm ready to do this. But it's still that little fear moment where you're like, it could all go wrong, but right. If it doesn't, it's going to be wonderful. So I suppose I kind of get a similar feeling.
and maybe in a similar way, you're dealing with a person. It's another boxer, you know, arms, body, legs, but it's still a human being with thoughts and psych outs and all that stuff that we, you know, are engaged in as human beings, whether it's socially or professionally. You know, I always felt in sports I was a little bit of a psych out. You know, if I shot a basketball and you were guarding me, you know, I was going to miss just because you were guarding me, kind of a thing. So I think I suffer awareness of others. You know, and when you're in a collaborative field like mine, it's the others that will allow the process to go forward. So I've had to you know, gain strength in terms of what it means to have fortitude and a conviction of what I believe next to people who are above me creatively, who may have different opinions.
That's a very interesting thing to say, because having come from being a musician and also being a boxer as well, in both aspects, I wear my heart on my sleeve. So, you know, obviously if I do a performance and people don't enjoy it, and that's what I worry about, they're not going to enjoy it, but that's truly honestly how I feel when I play the music. And it's the same in boxing. It's like, whether you're going to enjoy my style or my technique, and that's all me, it's nobody else. And I think sometimes it's very hard when you wear your heart on your sleeve, because creative people are like that. We're very open and honest with our emotions, almost too much, I think.
Right. But in the case of boxing, there's still someone who wins. There's an objective, tell me if I'm wrong, an objective ending of that experience, right? Which is, I win or I didn't win. In music, it's someone liked it someone liked it a lot, someone didn't like it at all. It's so subjective. And I think I guess that interests me about film, because if I'm in the service of a scene and of a drama, people aren't necessarily listening to me, even though they're absorbing it is what I'm doing. And so I think I kind of hide well. I think it gives me an opportunity to be expressive, and then to kind of hide behind the curtain and say, you don't have to pay attention if you don't want to.
But you see that you've got, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to film, the composer has the important role, because for me, it's the music that really moves me with the characterization of whatever the moment is. For example, in American Beauty, it's probably one of my all-time ever favorite films, just to let you know, and the soundtrack for that is something that will always remain with me. But the floating plastic bag scene, that theme, that is one of the most beautiful cinematography moments, plus the music just being perfect. And I think, like, the fact that you kind of hiding behind the stage, but that's what's made that moment. And I think music is such a great technique, and it's such a great instrument in actually being right there at the right time. And that's why your job's so important.
Right. I mean, I know what you're saying, that it's emotion. I'm carrying emotion, but I do have the value of a story, a situation, a manner of filming that I can say, how do I support this, or how do I move up in front of it? And you're right, I do have to step forward, but I can kind of lie to myself. It's kind of like closing your eyes, revving your engine, and heading towards a brick wall. You think, I just hope I don't hit it. So I mean, in a way, I'm trying to fool myself, I think, a lot by saying, okay, I'm in the service of an emotional situation, and it is this, or maybe it's not this, but if I put this emotion underneath it, can I elicit this? And then of course I get all kinds of help from a director saying, yes, no, I don't know what you're talking about, this is awful, or I can't believe what an improvement this is. You're constantly getting measurements that on a collaborative level help you move forward.
Yeah, I know, and that must be quite tricky sometimes, because I'm sure there are a lot of people which have a lot of opinions and they don't always necessarily match.
That's right, and you run the gamut from very smart people to not very smart people, and I think along the way you have to learn what to listen to, what you have no choice but to listen to. There are those situations, wrong or right, but you have to be, I think, a true judge of character, as it relates. By that I mean a directorial character, to just not waste your energy. And if the idea is to get as good a thing coming forward, how do you do that in spite of or because of someone who is either not so smart or incredibly smart? In the case of American Beauty, I mean, Sam Mendes, insanely intelligent, insanely facile in his knowledge of music, great ear. So I really had a lot of help, just him lifting me up.
Yeah. No, that film will forever be one of my favorites, and it's just generally beautiful all the way around, all aspects of it, and I just enjoy it every time to watch. So yeah, no, big fan of that one. So what was your favorite score to write? What was the favorite one to write? I don't know, that maybe that's got two questions. What was your favorite score that the outcome was you were most happy with, and which one did you enjoy writing the most, I should probably say?
It's good that you put it that way, because when it's happening, I've said this before, but when it's happening, you always wonder if it's going to fall apart. So the idea of just saying, wow, this is great, I'm having a great time writing, if you do that, you're kind of leaving yourself open, to something going bad at any moment. So I kind of pull back and tiptoe through an experience, as opposed to sip champagne and say this is going to be the best ever. And then looking back, often the best ones are, you're almost left with a physical memory. I don't know, in the case of working with Mike Nichols on Angels in America, which was a tough experience, I just remember the sound of an actor tying his shoelaces, and how physicalized just the sound of the string was as a shoe was tied. You wonder, why are those things remain in my mind, or just a certain kind of physicality or sensuality that you're left with? Doesn't answer your question specifically. So I'm looking back, I would say Wall-E would be one of them. The second Pixar movie I did, just because I so appreciated the subject matter, the underdog aspect of it, the heart in it. And probably along the way, that was pretty great too. But I mean, because Pixar people are so collaborative, but you kind of have to believe them. When they say it's okay to fail, sometimes directors will say, oh yeah, it's fine to fail. And then they're freaked out by the failures you present. So you're allowed in, and then you're kind of tisk a bit. But maybe Wall-E, is in 1917 would maybe be similar. I mean, a very, very tough experience, but so rewarding in the end. I've done a lot of work in London. I was in London for maybe 3 months, as I was on 2 of the Bond movies as well. But a great place to make music. I mean, so a lot of joy there working at Abbey Road on 1917, as well as Skyfall and Spectre.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Was it really exciting to actually do a Bond film? What was your experience, or were you nervous about coming to do the music for a Bond film? Because there's been so many of them, and that people kind of have an expectation for Bond films, don't they? So how did you feel?
They do, because the tune is so great. So you can't not use the tune. And then the question is, how do you use the tune? And Bond as a character has changed. So the whole kind of tuxedo bow tie thing and martini, it works, but it may not work as thematically. So it was a job I never would have even considered, except that Sam Mendes again had gotten the job and asked me to do it. I was nervous that I was American and such a British, franchise. Which became really apparent to me when we had to do the theme, when you saw the Aston Martin in the garage and suddenly you hear da da da, and there was a lot of conversation about what a jada was. I mean, just those classic Bond phrases, those John Barry kind of jazzy things, and I remember being on this podium thinking I'm a Yank, here in London, and how do I get out of this one? It's because it's all a matter of taste. My dad had a great line, which was everyone has two businesses, knows two businesses, theirs and music. I mean, the thing is, everyone's going to have an opinion about music. I mean, on any movie, people say, I don't care about this or about this, but the music is such and such. It's just so, as you suggest, it's so basic that everyone's going to weigh in on what it means and how well it works or how well it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's the Bond films are super iconic, and I'm a massive Bond fan, and I like, I've watched all of them. There's all the big songs at the beginning, and then of course every single one has something different going on. Did you have to, did you research the other films, or did you want to come up with fresh ideas that were slightly different? Because obviously being a more modern film.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about study, obviously I had a whole sense of the vibe of what it is and the tune. But when I thought about, all right, should I go back and watch all the classic movies and see what all these composers have done along this, I think when I did Skyfall, it was the 50th year anniversary.
Yeah.
So I kind of didn't, I for two reasons. One, it just seemed daunting to just take that all on. And then the other is, well, who am I next to this, and how do I put forward fresh ideas in the context of classical themes or classic Bond themes that just need to be utilized. So I didn't do as much study as I probably could have, but I was grateful not to, because in the end I felt it would have crushed me.
Yeah, I mean, it's often for me, whether I'm performing or actually if I'm boxing, watching different people do the same thing, like performance-wise, bassoon pieces and things, watching people perform them. Sometimes it can be actually quite confusing because you listen to so many different ones, and then you're like, actually, do I want it to be like this? Do I want it to be like this? But then you actually want it to be your very own. So you're like, right. I don't want it to sound like somebody else's, but I love that way that they've done that. So it can be quite confusing.
Or you listen to it for a while and then you put it aside and kind of try to forget that you listened, so that you can try to bring some kind of freshness to something new. I mean, that's the idea of curated performances. If you're doing a Verdi opera or something that's been done 1,000 times, why is it being done? I mean, it's being kind of curated, like in a way going to a museum and lifting this music up, over time, because it has value. I think that's why writing is more interesting to me than performing, because I feel like, okay, I can get out there and do something hopefully that no one has done ahead of me, as opposed to saying, well, I'm going to play a Rachmaninoff Etude Tableau worse than 50 other pianists who would always play faster than me and better than me.
Yeah, I think it is difficult with that side of it, but everybody's got their own little take on it. I think sometimes once you relax into your own style, then eventually it comes out. I remember when I started actually with boxing, I was so determined to be like, I need to look like everybody else, that actually after a while I was like, you know what, I actually prefer to look like this, and this is my style and I do well like this. So I'm not really sure why I was putting so much stress on myself.
Right, yeah, but I guess you learn that over time, right? And you measure its value to you as it's happening, and then you refine yourself. Like, that's an act of self-refinement though, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And you can always better what you originally had. So I think you can always make it better or make it different and make it something new to come across. So I quite like that side of it.
I mean, in terms of boxing, is it something that is just so present tense? Is that one of the things you like about it? Because it's so in the moment, you cannot escape the present tense of it?
Yeah, I love that about it, I must admit. So it's different from music in the way that, like you said, there's always a winner. Somebody wins and somebody loses. But you know, it is very dance-like, you know, and it is when you're in the moment and you're in that flow and it's everything's just perfect. You're both kind of working together, coordinated perfectly, and it's a very violent but beautiful sort of dance, and I really appreciate that.
And how long is it typically? Is it under an hour? Is it, I mean,
So for
about usually?
if I'm fighting for, so my next fight is a upcoming world title fight. So that's going to be 10 2-minute rounds. So that's 20 minutes plus your 10 extra minutes in the corner. So that's 30 minutes. And then they always have like the walk-ins, which can be as long as you want them to be. Then we have the national anthems as well, because it's a world title. So yeah, you know, about an hour for the whole thing to kind of go through itself, if it goes the full distance, or if you knock them out in the second round, it's cut short.
Man.
Yeah, a little bit different.
But is there a correlation between music and boxing, or is it just here's one arm, here's another arm, and they both have great value to me? But can you see a bassoonist when you're in the ring, or vice versa?
You can see it, but there's aspects of it which are very similar. So obviously, with being a musician, I have to have good rhythm, and it's the same thing in the ring. Good rhythm stands you in great stead. And also for me, it's actually more the performance angle. I love to perform in an orchestra. I love that moment, the little adrenaline hit when you're in an orchestra and there's, you know, I don't know, 120 of you, you're all in the moment playing the same thing, creating the same emotional effect. And
Yeah.
I get the same feeling when the lights go down in the ring and the bell goes and everybody's watching what's going on there. And anything can change just like that in boxing. It's so sudden. So it's the same sort of excitement about a performance, really.
How interesting. So it's like this essential organization followed by a something, and you like that. Wow.
Yeah. But I was actually going to ask you, so when you're like, you know, Marley used to do sort of particular themes for his characters. So he had like the hero theme and, you know, the maiden's theme and all that sort of thing. When you're doing a film, do you research into the sort of the characters of the film to attach a sort of thematic material which is associative to them, or like in relation to where the film's based, or about do you get to know the actor? Do you ever think about any of that?
You do. Yeah, you think about all of it. I guess the idea of saying here is a character and here's a motif that I associate with this character early in the movie, middle of the movie, late of the movie. Oftentimes that can kind of be misleading, a little bit paint by numbers, but at the same time you have to do it. And mostly it's what the movie allows. I mean, there are moments when that kind of approach is a good classical kind of movie music approach, and other times where it's not. And I think each thing you go into, you kind of have to see what it is, just the look of it, the nuance of the performers, the instructions you're getting from a director or a producer, all of that kind of go in to say, yeah, here's a theme here, and it really does want to repeat here, or it wants to repeat later on. And I guess the way I work just before I'm finished is to have a number of ideas and put them everywhere in a movie, kind of just say, this is an interesting piece of music right here. What if it were right here? Oh, wow, I love it here. Well, if I love it here, what does it make this? And you're kind of putting the puzzle pieces together. And just to say, you know, because it's one thing to write a 2-minute piece and another thing to write over a period of 2 hours and say, what does that 2 minutes here mean to some 4 or 5 minute, you know, piece later on? So it's always changing, but it's certainly what you describe is probably the way you always start, which is what are the similarities? What is the, you know, what can you take away at the simplest level?
Was that easier or harder for the animated films?
In animation, you're writing more. You're writing a lot of transitions. There's a lot more kind of, okay, we're starting in this tempo and we're graduating to this tempo, and how do we get there? So even in terms of presenting ideas, I had to write more. When you're writing for live action, you can just have a vibe, a feeling, and say, let's put it here, let's put it here. I tried to do that on Nemo, just to in my first meetings with Andrew Stanton, the director, and it was just, yeah. So what you know, because vibes and feelings last like 5 seconds in animation. You know, typically it's not like these periods of just kind of floating around, which, you know, you can kind of go a long way with. You know, I'm just kind of going to have this ambient kind of frozen tone that goes for 45 seconds.
Yeah.
No, and you know, if you're underwater, the fishtail wiggles, and what are you going to do?
Well, I suppose, yeah, I could imagine actually any sort of emotional sort of content that we would have, like a moment in a film, you know, like the love scene or like the dramatic moment, you can use something for quite a period of time. But I think in animation it's also like this all the time, and
it's true. I mean, but there are moments, you know, when, you know, there was a theme for kind of Nemo and his dad, and it does come back at the end. So you know, there are moments that are going to be obvious. They're going to say, wow, this right here really needs to come back. And you go, okay, so that's a hinge or a linchpin or whatever you'd call it. And you kind of, you know, work until you connect it. And again, try to remember that, you know, you're a person in an audience watching and listening, that you're not a composer, you know, making sure that the, you know, pianissimo to mezzo forte over a period of 2 bars is working perfectly. That's the music making. But what is it to be an audience member and to be open to the feelings that that the music gives you in the context of the image.
So going on from that, so when you're doing a film, say when you did Fried Green Tomatoes, I absolutely love that film. I came across it out of nowhere. My mom and I used to love watching it. It's just a great story. But you know, like where it's set, and the same thing for, you know, like Shawshank Redemption, and where it is set in that part of the world. Do you actually like write to kind of fit sort of cultural music where the film is based, or things like that?
You can, and sometimes the associations are there but not specific. What is it like in the case of Shawshank Redemption to use a fiddle? You know, they're in Maine, aren't they? So what is that tradition? You know, is there any kind of fiddle tradition in Maine? I'm guessing not. So you as a composer, sometimes you're saying, okay, if there's a dusty trail, does that mean you can pluck a guitar? You know, these associations that you can make that either are generic or you know, a part of the genre. I guess I've said that before, which is where does it work and where is it just a bore?
Yeah.
But I think, you know, you're talking about essential vocabulary. What's musical vocabulary as it relates to time and location? And that is something that you of course you think about. I mean, when I worked with Sam again on Road to Perdition, it was early 1930s in Chicago, but it wasn't like we said, all right, so this is pre-electronics and therefore all we'll use is acoustic instruments, because that's what the period would be. The minute you get into those areas, you can be doctrinaire without knowing it. And the issue is, if you're just trying to create or help underline drama, what are the tools that you / any composer have to make that interesting? You know, in the end, is it interesting, and does the sound knock you out? Do you think the sound doesn't belong in this movie? And typically that's a very non-intellectual decision you make. You know, you go, whoa, this is something that's great about this, but I don't buy it with this image or the look of that character, and it doesn't work. So you're using a lot of common sense.
Oh, good. Well, yeah, I was wondering if you were kind of associated, if you were told that it had to have some links to a particular place with your music. I was wondering if that was part of what is the remit you're told when you get to hear about the film and things.
Well, yeah, because everyone has a predisposition about what something should sound like, and any good composer will try to accommodate that. And even if I have a different idea, you don't want a director to think that you're just ignoring stuff like that. In the case of Wall-E, Andrew Stanton again really saw a kind of Star Wars score, you know, big space opera, and it occurred to me that just couldn't hold. That the movie was different than Star Wars, and therefore, even though it was in space and had all this kind of, you know, scale and magnificence, that it just couldn't support space opera kind of, you know, just sawing away forever. But I kind of had to prove that to Andrew. I had to, as much as I could, kind of accommodate that idea until I could say, is this a better idea? Because that's always the way you can convince people of alternate things, is by doing something that they think they want before you do something you think might be better. And then no one thinks they're being kind of had, like I'm coming in with an agenda, right? Which, you know, late in the game, it kind of can happen where a director wants to make sure you're working for him or her.
Oh, that could be quite stressful, actually, I can imagine.
Yeah,
Especially when you have an idea about what you really think it should sound like, but they have something completely different. There's like black and white. They're just completely different.
that's right. And it means a lot more writing. And in the end, I think that's probably what saves me is the minute I feel like if the less territory I have, the more I'm going to defend my territory. So if you're a director and I come to you with my great theme and that's all I have and you don't like it, then
Yeah.
I'm going to defend it because it's all I am. It's all I've got. But if I can rewrite something and then have you say, well, say, let's listen to idea one and idea two, it's going to give you a much better sense of what you like and why you like it. Oh, I like idea two much better. And I know, having heard idea one, as opposed to here's idea one and you scratch your head and you think, I don't know. I think I like it, but I just don't know. And you have to kind of give directors the benefit of the doubt that way, I think.
As humans,
Gotta be tough for them.
we love options, don't we? We like to have loads of ideas to pick from, just enough that we think, okay, this is definitely worth our time. So I like this one, not so sure about this one. Everyone likes to go, oh, this is my favorite.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So
And then the more you play, I mean, there's always something shocking about what's new. I'm the opening tune for the Shawshank Prison. I remember thinking I really liked that piece. And typically the pieces I love are the pieces that are dumped, because maybe because you like them so much, and you become precious about them for the wrong reasons. But I was shocked that everyone continues to like that piece. You just never know. Should I have written something else? Is this the right approach? But I think I tend to just write a lot because it's fun. I enjoy it. B, writing new ideas sometimes gives you more information, and a director's right. The first idea wasn't as good as I thought. So oftentimes you can be saved by having to rewrite something because it opens another door and you get farther along down the line. If only it made sense, if only it were more civilized, but it's pretty chaotic. I'm sure you know this as a bassoonist, that, music is, just the social politics of it is pretty chaotic. And people are all slightly strange, me included. I mean, we're all just slightly strange.
I totally agree there. So a really simple example for that for me was I played with the St. Petersburg Ballet Theatre. We did Swan Lake here in London for a whole run. And being in a Russian orchestra, the way that they play Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake is completely different to how an English orchestra plays it. And I remember sitting in the rehearsal for the first time thinking, this is going fast, or this is completely not how I thought it was going to go, or they've taken this really slow, strange sort of like the sort of mood changes in the piece and it suddenly becomes something completely different. But it sounds, in my head, I was like, this sounds so very Russian now, like what I associated with it. But yeah, there's definitely one of those times where you're sitting there going, I'm not sure.
Did you think it was wrong or just different?
It wasn't wrong, and like you said, it's great to be able to take on different ideas and actually be open-minded enough to accept them. Like, so it shows a real sort of humbleness on your part, and like you're not like completely like ego driven. Of course there's pieces that you actually associate that you like the best, but you always have a soft spot for them, but then you're open-minded to be able to go, okay, I'll try it this way and I'll try it that way. And I kind of felt when I heard the Russian version, actually, that after hearing it a few times and performing it like that, I actually felt, what, this actually suits the composer more, and it suits the fact that it's a Russian opera, Russian ballet. And I was just like, yeah, actually, I was pleased with it afterwards.
You ever think too that you have a predisposition about a piece of music that you've heard for the first time and it's moved you, and you're just so moved by it that's it. It doesn't even matter if it's too slow or too fast. That's what's connected you emotionally to the piece. And any other time you hear it, it's just like, whoa, it's not as good as the first time I heard it, with this orchestra or something.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes as well that we get like associated to particular like a sound that comes from a particular orchestra, that you like the way that they play. And for example, for me, hearing different orchestras from around the world and playing a different sort of pitch as well. We're at 440 here in the UK, but that's different elsewhere in Russia.
Like 444
yeah. So I was going to ask, do you have a favorite orchestra that you've worked with that you really thought just they got the music and it performed it just exactly how you wanted it?
Well, I'm a guy who I'm always playing to the speakers, right? So I'm not like you for the most part in live environments, having my music interpreted. So I'm on the podium. I'm on the podium with some amazing players in Los Angeles, pickup players who read exceptionally well, who are pliant and open and want to do great things. Absolutely love them. London, there's so many musicians in London, and I think there's such a sense of ensemble, particularly out of the string section, because they play together so much. So the orchestra I work with, which is I don't know if they have a name, but it's an orchestra that Isabel Griffiths, the fixer in London, and her team has put together for years. Just an extraordinary group of players that you just kind of jaw drop. They're so able, they're so courteous, and really deeply musical.
Yeah, I think actually probably one of our real strong points that we have here in the UK is that we're great sight readers. It's something that we have to practice a lot at university and at college and things like that, So, but I think the UK is known, especially string players, for being brilliant sight readers and able to jump in last minute to do a show for something that they've never played before or a long time ago, and they'll be fine. They can deal with the pressure of it. And
I mean, that just makes my heart beat when you say that. Just the idea of coming in cold and playing some complex opera in a pit next to others, and am I going to lose my place? I was never a great sight reader,
oh,
piano.
For me, that's the buzz of it. I think sometimes when you get asked to go and do a gig, and you might get a few hours in the afternoon to rehearse it, but you stepped in last minute, and then especially for opera, because there's going to be times when you think you should be playing and the singer's coming in, and it's that moment there, but it's the kind of the adrenaline, it's the exciting part.
But then you still have to rely on a conductor cueing you, right? I mean, is all you're doing counting? Is that, I mean, when you're doing something over a period of 4 hours or whatever, Wagner or whatever, aren't you just constantly saying, okay, this is measure 24, and I'm coming in at measure 70 or something? I mean, it must be, you just have to count well, right? Always be aware of, downbeats and things.
Absolutely. And I must admit, for example, when it comes to like slow movements in a piano concerto or something, as a bassoonist, we count so many bars. There's so many
where you're not
bars.
playing, right?
Yeah, and it's just all piano, and I'm just thinking bar 84. So we're going through, but yeah, we do a lot of counting. But actually, when it's in opera, you're kind of involved in the emotion of the situation, and as a wind player, we're all kind of breathing together. We're looking to each other to bring each other in for the solo parts. We're playing together, and there's a lot of kind of connection with other people during that, as well as the conductor. So especially as wind players, we're soloists, so we're waiting for that moment to and it's us, and this is what we're trying to create.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot more kind of an innate leadership in a wind section, isn't there? Because all of you are kind of playing your only instruments, unlike a string section. Because when I was growing up, I'd be like in the back part of the second violin, last chair, and in the right. I mean, I was always terrified. But I mean, I do have wonderful experiences in retrospect playing in kind of community orchestras, and playing Mahler's Fourth for the first time in Santa Monica, and thinking, wow, it's pretty great to have played that symphony ahead of really understanding it. I mean, I'm young when I describe this, maybe in my earlier mid-teens or something. But I was always very nervous that I'd turn the page at the wrong moment, and all those things that would humiliate musicians,
Yeah.
Right.
We're coming in on the rest,
That's it. And musicians can be a mean bunch, if you're not doing things the right way. There can be some snobism, and I got a fair amount of that. I think I still struggle against this early concept of self as it relates to how fast do my fingers move, how well do I count, what's my sense of intonation. And to play violin, I mean, that's an unforgiving instrument.
I was going to say, so you did violin and piano. I must admit, violin is a very hard instrument, and for me, I always my piano teacher always said to me, Hannah, you've got bassoonist hands, because my hands stay in one place when I play the bassoon, but on the piano I've got to move them, and I'm terrible at that.
So did you not get very far in piano? Did you just stay for a few years?
Yeah, I did up to about my grade 4, but that was about it. But I played the flute first before the bassoon, and I did up to my grade 7 in that. And then, much to my flute teacher's upset, I found the bassoon at that point. I was like, this is the instrument for me. So,
why?
Yeah.
Why bassoon, do you think? I mean, forgetting your hands for a second, did you just love the quality of that double reed and the silkiness of the tone, or?
Well, I was really lucky to have a very kind lady donate a bassoon to our secondary school. So it meant that, because she was appalled there wasn't one in the orchestra, so she donated one. And I was playing the flute at the time, and I was one of 25 flautists or something, and I was fed up being one of 25 people. And the bassoon looked so beautiful that I thought, you know what, that looks different and interesting. I'll give that a go. And it just so happened to be the thing for me. I really loved it.
I've heard that story a lot. We needed a tubist, in marching band, and so I was the only one who raised my hand, and then that becomes my life. I love that idea that something as random as we need a bassoon in an orchestra kind of alters the course of your life.
Absolutely.
Just kind of, someone was kind enough to donate an instrument, and you were curious enough to want to play it.
Yeah, it's a nice little moment. And as a bassoonist, I've got to ask you, have you ever written any sort of motifs that are for the bassoon, for a character? Because often we play like the jokey people, we play the fools basically, in most things, or the dramatic tenor moments in the opera. But have you ever written anything specifically with the bassoon in mind, or had the bassoon in mind for a particular moment?
I mean, certainly in wind choir. I mean, it used to be that I didn't, as a young student, I never understood what it meant to write for winds, because they were just, all of them sounded different. So what was a wind choir sound, and how did you kind of mesh it? And I love wind choir. I mean, the opportunities I have to just, to see interlocking oboes and bassoons and clarinets, is just such a glorious sound. In a movie long ago, I think it was called Josh and Sam, I wrote for bassoon, but it was slightly quirky. I mean, to kind of go in this, down the road you're suggesting, is that what is it? I mean, if you're saying what would you assign a bassoon dramatically, and does that put you in this place just because, like a saxophone now on a certain level?
Yeah.
If people have alto saxophones, there's a certain predisposition that arises. Okay, when I hear saxophone, this is what I think of.
Yeah.
So oftentimes in film music, we have to bear that in mind. What is a clarinet? And a single reed instrument, and what is the feeling that is giving? Why does the oboe sound slightly sad? There's a sad and kind of an innate sadness to an oboe. Great beauty, but kind of heartbroken in a way, if obviously depending on the type of line you're writing. So we have all these kind of reflexive dramatic responses to instruments as it relates to, I mean, now put it next to an image and you think, oh, there's an oboe next to this lovely couple or whatever, and it makes them sadder than they should be. So, well, let's try flute, airier, I mean, simple things like that, which is just, they're pre-intellectual things where we react before we think about why we're reacting. I think that's what some of the things I love about film music is it's just reactive. And mostly I try to imagine myself, I write a piece, put it up against an image, and then try to forget I wrote it and say, what is this making me feel? Forget that I wrote it because I'm attached to it because I wrote it and because it took me time. But in the end, it's not as good as I thought. And I have to be ready to say, okay, to veer away from ideas I spend a lot of time on.
That must be very difficult, actually, and it's a real skill to do that, because I think people do get blinded by things that they've, like you said, spent a lot of time on, because people's time is precious to them. So they feel that when I've spent a lot of time on this, it
must be good.
Time.
Yeah, I mean, you have to like this, and the minute I say that to a director, this is great. Anyone's going to dig their heels. I mean, that's kind of what commerce is. I can't push you into buying something I'm selling. I mean, I can, but there's a real chance you're not going to want to buy it because I'm selling it, because it's a hard sell. So again, I try to offset that by saying, well, what about this idea instead? And then now the director is not faced with having to make a choice. I've circled back to something I said before, but all roads circle to the idea that in the end, we're trying to, I work for someone who's created this movie. who's directed it, who's been on it way longer than me, and I really need to respect that insight. I can't just say, listen, you've hired me and I'm great and my ideas are what's going to happen, because no one's going to like that in the end, even if they think they like it in the middle. In the end, it's all going to kind of go, I never liked that piece, but I just, I didn't have the courage to tell that to Tom, so I kind of want to get to the rejection as quickly as I can so I can pivot from it and make something better.
Okay, so I know a little bit more about your character now, but I want you to say, if you could play any character in a film, who would it be? And don't go on your how you are as a person, like, the guy. Who would be the person that you want to play in a film?
Yeah, I can't even come close to answering that question. It is like you asking me to dance. I just can't do it. I mean, it's so I think my nature is a shy one, right? So the idea of saying, well, I would be this character in this movie. Can I just say I can't answer that respectfully? Absolutely.
I think that's a very honest response, and one that I was actually expecting you to say as well.
Humphrey Bogart and whatever.
Yeah. So if you thinking about films and things, obviously I imagine that you enjoy to go to the cinema, or do you not enjoy it as much because you're actually working for it all the time?
That's a good question. A lot of times it's hard to separate choices that you see made in movies because you spend so much time in the making of them. I like comedy a lot because, again, you're either laughing or you're not. I think I appreciate that obviousness. I'm laughing or I'm not laughing. I like the idea of the cinema, probably because I like salty popcorn and fizzy Coke, and it's fun to just kind of eat and drink and enjoy something. And at home, I tend to fall asleep and not make it through something. So, I guess I like cinema on that level, just that it makes it more of an experience.
Yeah, definitely. If you could pick any film that you'd like to have been involved with as a composer, which one would you love to have been involved with?
It's funny you say that, because a lot of times movies that might interest me as a composer, like maybe the Year of Living Dangerously, Peter Weir, or Risky Business by Paul Brickman's movie, you sense amazing style coming from the music and from the sensibility. But if you trace that style, typically it's a directorial style. It's ideas of music that a director is putting forth. So I would say those two movies, but they're done and I had nothing to do with them in the first place. But I like what the music is doing to me, and I like how it's informing the images a lot.
Have you ever thought about doing a soundtrack to some of the old silent films? So doing composing music to go with a silent film from the past?
Well, my dad, started in Hollywood in the 30s and conducted the scores to City Lights in Modern Times. So I guess City Lights is all not, it's a total silent. I guess Modern Times is not. I don't know. That's a tough gig too. That's a little like animation. It's what is music doing to turn dramatic situations, and it's doing a lot of work. So I'm not sure if that would interest me. I've never thought about it. I'll have to think about that.
Yeah, the only reason I ask is I have a friend, his name is Alex Menzies, and he was an electronic music kind of DJ sort of thing. And he basically took The Damnation of Faust, the old black and white movie, and he wrote a
new score.
Yeah, an underscore for it, the whole thing, and did electronic music to go along with it. And I went to see it in a cinema in Glasgow, and it was a really cool experience because what I was watching was black and white and old footage, but it was with this sort of more modern style music that I really enjoyed, and it had obviously strings involved with the Scottish string ensemble were there. They did part of the music with him, so it was a really interesting collaboration. So yeah,
it becomes kind of random in a way, right? Which is you're taking something so old, putting something so new, and it really is like a fresh invention. So
Yeah.
I think any composer that does that really has to have a reason for doing it, you know, and a goal in mind in terms of the kind of response that's trying to be elicited.
So I think we're coming close to the end of our session, but I have sort of one question. Lastly, when I still go to the cinema, like I still get as excited as a little kid, basically, because I just love. I know I'm going to be completely immersed in something for up 2 hours or whatever, and nothing else outside in the real world is going to bother me, and I still get that childlike excitement. Can you give me one word to describe why you think people love the cinema?
Escape. I mean, it's kind of what you're saying, right? Which is the idea of entering into a new environment and having it wash over you. And at its best, when you're in the hands of great storytellers, and you can really, when a movie like Shawshank Redemption or The Godfather, you know, you can come on that movie, either of those movies, 40 minutes in and watch the remaining 2.5 hours and feel riveted. I mean, I think life is so complex that you do want to feel like you can just be somewhere and be open to what it is. So that kind of openness to letting experience in is probably the thing that is the most desirable thing. But you've said the same thing. You said it before you asked me the question. I think I agree with you. It's just exciting when the lights go down. It's a very exciting moment.
Absolutely.
So promising, right? It's very promising.
Yeah, definitely. And it's all that sort of the excitement of, you don't, like you said, the present that's not opened. That's exactly what it is. And you know you haven't seen it, and you're just excited to see how it's all going to play out.
That's exactly right.
Well, thank you so much for talking to me today.
Yeah, this is great. You asked great questions. I really appreciate your questions.
No, I really, really enjoyed it. And like I said, obviously, I'm a massive fan of a lot of the films that you wrote music for. So for me, it's been a very enjoyable chat. So I'm actually it's been good.
Well, thank you. From Tom Newman, thank you so much. It's great to be here.